Okay, can you hear me? Yeah, okay. Thank you. So, welcome everyone to the Train Open Live event, online and also in person here at Camberwell College of Arts. And we're really happy to have a train event at Camberwell. We normally operate out of Chelsea, um, but we decided to venture a bit up the road into South London, very rarely, but we decided to do it this time. And venture into the territory of Camberwell. We're really pleased to be here. My name is Paul Goodwin. I'm director of TrAIN, the Research Centre for Transnational Art, Identity and Nation at University of the Arts. And it's a real pleasure and a privilege to welcome artist and researcher Rita Mahfouz, who will be introduced shortly by Dr. Michael Asbury, TrAIN Deputy Director and UAL Reader in the History and Theory of Art. But first, I wanted to say just a quick few words about TrAIN, especially for those of you who are perhaps joining the TrAIN Open live event for the first time. So TrAIN is a community of researchers based at UAL that in our work, we try to challenge dominant notions of globalization and we attempt to create new visions of a more plural and worlded art and design history and theory. We're made up of curators, art and design historians, artists, and theorists from across main disciplines at UAL. And we have evolved over 20 years, a thriving community of research students and associate researchers, many of whom are artists. If you want to find out more about us and what we do, please, including for future events, please look at our website, which is on the main UAL website under Research Centres, and then search for TrAIN. Just a bit of housekeeping before we start. We've got fire exits here on both sides, on either side of the lecture theatre. There's also low lighting in the room because of the performance tonight. So please watch your step. Toilets are just outside through the door, I think on this side, I believe. And for those on Zoom, you do have a viewing option to either just focus on the actual film or the actual screen, or on Rita, on the speaker, which you can adjust on your computer. And also, please feel free to send any questions online through chat, and we'll feed it through. And Michael will be moderating. So without further ado, Michael, can you come and introduce Rita? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Paul. Welcome, everyone. Welcome those online. It's my great pleasure to introduce Rita Mahfouz. Rita is a visual artist, filmmaker and researcher based in Edinburgh. Her work and practice sits at the intersection of visual culture and spatial studies. It explores form and aesthetics across political and ideological structures, focusing specifically on how space is constructed and represented. She is drawn to photographic portrayals of cities in distress, as she terms it, especially Beirut, her hometown. And this will be the theme of tonight's performance lecture, a performance in the form of a lecture. Her work has been exhibited in venues such as the Beirut Art Center, Sursock Museum and Circa Museum, and screened at international festivals, including the Lebanese Film Festival, Sharjah Film Platform, and Architecture's Film Festival. She has received recently a visual arts fund from the Arab Fund for Art and Culture, and a film fund from the Dora Film Institute to support the production of an experimental film. She's currently pursuing a practice-based PhD at Edinburgh College of Art, the University of Edinburgh. It is from there where I saw her perform this lecture, and I was very much impressed, which drew me to invite her to come and perform to you today. So I hope very much that you enjoy it as much as I did. Rita, thank you very much for coming.
Thank you, Michael. مرحبا.
شو عندك؟
مصور البناية. بدك تشوف؟
بس
ايه طالبة بعد بدك بطاقتي؟
طالبة؟
ايه
تصوري بنية من ورا.
ايه والله ريحي.
انت بحتى ستاند هون ممنوع.
يلا خلص. Since 2021, I've been obstinately shooting the buildings of Beirut city center, documenting the stark presence of solid opaque panels covering their windows and facades. These panels, sealing off sunlight and fresh air, seem to erupt in the urban fabric of the city, creating a dense, almost suffocating atmosphere. The heavy presence of these panels was striking, and I felt driven to capture as much as possible. Over the past 4 years, I've taken around 600 shots of these panels. My initial plan was to incorporate them in a documentary film, but after watching them over and over again, something shifted. I felt the need to present them in a live performance instead, in the manner of a performed film, probably to emphasize the weight and immediacy of the panels as I experienced them while capturing the images. These panels emerged and proliferated in the aftermath of the 2020 Beirut port explosion that shattered buildings and transformed the city's landscape. You've likely heard about this explosion as the shocking images of the moment of the blast have spread across the globe.
There's been a large explosion in Lebanon's capital, Beirut.
The blast wave has turned cars upside down. Absolute devastation.
We know that the blast knocked windows out as far as 10 kilometers away.
It was even heard and felt as far away as Cyprus.
This city is no stranger to explosions, but absolutely nothing like this.
Without warning, one of the largest non-nuclear blasts in history kills more than 200 people, injures thousands, and leaves hundreds of thousands homeless.
Lebanon's Prime Minister Hassan Diab has promised that those responsible for the catastrophe will pay the price.
On August 4, 2020, Beirut experienced the largest non-nuclear explosion in history. The explosion generated a massive white mushroom cloud and a supersonic blast wave, pulverizing whole neighborhoods and devastating everything in its path. The primary cause of injuries was the flying glass shards, leading to severe lacerations, eye injuries, and fatalities. Survivors described the glass hitting them like shooting guns, and even months later, people were still finding glass shards in their clothes and in their bedding. Many people were at their windows or balconies filming the fire caused by the initial smaller explosion that was later followed by the devastating blast. And this is partly why we have so many injuries, but also why we have so many shots and angles online, capturing the moment of the explosion.
كباية الصبح حرقت عيني رشة كتير
يا عطرة شو هيدا؟ شو هيدا؟ شو هيدا؟
go. Oh my God. Oh my.
هذا البور عم يحترق. الهنجرات عم يحترقوا، في هنجر كبير عم يحترق.
الله أكبر. الله أكبر.
نحن عم نعطيكم هلا الشي لايف.
لايف نيوز.
عن جد يمكن ما في غيرنا انه هيك عم نصور. شو هو هيدا الصوت؟ يا مشحرة فوت 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 عماد فوت 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 يا ماما. يا ماما يا ماما عماد فوت بليز بليز فوت بليز بليز يا مشحرة يا الله يا مشحرة. فجر شيء أكبر يا الله يا الله يا الله إن شاء الله ما حدا يصير له شيء. تعال فوت فوت عماد بليز فوت. تعال فوت جو انسان جو عماد عماد فوت. سكر لي إزازة بليز.
For generations, the Lebanese have learned to be wary of windows and glass facades. Upon hearing the first blast, many reported to instinctively retreat from windows, seeking refuge in the corridors. Others hid under tables or behind anything that could shield them from flying glass before the glass even shattered. A survival skill learned over years of war, battles, and rocket threats. And even in times of peace, and yes, we do have them, some react with the same frantic urgency at the sound of fireworks or any sudden loud noise. Another common practice that the Lebanese have acquired is to leave windows ajar when a blast or shockwave is anticipated. Closed windows are more likely to shatter under pressure, while an open window allows the shockwave to pass through, causing less harm. I remember on the night of the port explosion, I faced a tough choice. I was driving from Beirut to Byblos, having the radio on. I got a call from my mother. Rita, keep the car windows open, in case another explosion occurs. Because at that time, we still didn't know whether the blast was due to an accident, a terrorist attack, an Israeli rocket. Will there be another blast? I had forgotten about this tip and proceeded to do as she said. And right as I was opening the window, I heard an announcement on the radio from an ecologist imploring those living or driving near the port area to close their windows entirely or to cover them with whatever resources they have, fearing that the toxic fumes would spread and poison those in the vicinity. Tricky situation. Instead of enhancing the quality of life with light and views, glass has become a weapon wielded by a corrupt state. The tons of ammonium nitrate that exploded were illegally and unsafely stored for 7 years. 7 years. In a port located near residential areas. It is at least a negligence stemming from a corrupt political class that has caused countless tragedies over the past 35 years, a political class that has ruled the country since the end of the Civil War, meaning 1990. The Prime Minister promised accountability, but the port case has come to a standstill, and to this day, we still don't know who committed this horrible crime. The state even failed to assist in repairing the damage, leaving Beirut residents to rebuild with the support of NGOs and of charities. Additionally, injuries were exacerbated by the use of non-tempered glass in construction, despite a 2005 decree requiring the use of tempered glass for buildings over 21 meters for seismic concerns. Tempered glass shatters into small round pieces, causing minimal harm, and would have saved so many lives and injuries. But many developers, often connected to state leaders, evade compliance, and adopt the cheapest materials. Lebanon's glass industry, although historically significant, has suffered repeated blows during the civil war and the 2006 war with Israel, leading to a decline in local production. As a result, glass, especially for window panes, is primarily imported from countries like Turkey and Egypt. But after the explosion, demand for imported glass surged, causing shortages all over the country. Many residents could only afford to repair one window or two, and some resorted to using tarpaulin, plastic, or even nylon sheets as supposedly temporary solution against wind, rain, and looting. If you visit Beirut today, you'll be surprised to see that some of these panels are still there, 5 years after the blast. In fact, this shot was taken last August. As you can see, these panels vary in shape, color, and material. Some are neatly arranged, while others appear more improvised. Some feature unique colors and even intricate patterns. I spent a considerable time contemplating how to work with and present these panels. Should I group them by color, by material, by architectural type or function? The more I observed these colorful surfaces, the stranger they appeared, almost as if I was seeing things that weren't quite there, distorting my perception of reality. It was as if these panels were not just shields or barriers, but also seemed to mirror the disarray of the whole political landscape. So at first, I thought the panels were simply a trace of the August 4 explosion or high-energy impacts, but soon realized they represented much more than this. In fact, many of the panels I collected were actually the result of the financial crisis that hit the country a few months before the explosion. Lebanon's 2019 financial crisis plunged the country into its biggest economic collapse in modern history. Not that I like to use a superlative every time I describe a crisis in Lebanon, but the World Bank has ranked it among the top 3 most severe economic collapses worldwide since the mid-19th century. Decades of political corruption, reliance on foreign loans, and the bloated public sector led to the collapse, with the Lebanese lira losing over 90% of its value. Inflation has soared to over 250% today, driving up the cost of essentials like food, fuel, and medicine, which remain scarce. Businesses have gone bankrupt and unemployment has surged. Despite the magnitude of the crisis, Lebanon's political leaders have taken 0 steps to address it, 0 steps, allowing the situation to worsen daily. This collapse, it's an ongoing collapse, has eroded public trust in the government, sparking protests across the nation as people continue to demand reform and accountability. Especially active in Beirut, citizens took the streets en masse, pushing through barricades erected to block access to parliament and other governmental institutions. The protests and uprisings that began in October 2019 resulted in shattered glass and significant upheaval lasting for months. Some shop owners, forced to close due to market stagnation, left behind windows never repaired, creating a patchwork of broken glass and makeshift coverings. To protect the city center's luxurious boutiques from potential vandalism, panels were installed, but these quickly became canvases for graffiti or protest art. In a show of anger, some protesters vandalized the opulent shops owned by prominent political figures, using their hands and rudimentary tools to smash the facades. Now, the sturdiest panels I've shot so far are those shielding the banks. Just days after the massive protests erupted, Lebanon witnessed the most blatant bank robbery in its history, another superlative, one where the banks robbed the people and not the other way around. After decades of opaque financial practices and protection from political leaders, both domestic and foreign, Lebanese commercial banks chose to offload their bankruptcy onto the citizens and unlawfully restricted depositors' access to their own funds, creating barriers for withdrawal despite the absence of official capital controls. Desperate for cash to pay for basic services like healthcare, an increasing number of citizens resorted to armed robbery as a means to access their deposits. These bank robbers have been hailed as national heroes, and none have faced prosecution to date. But in response, banks across the country fortified their facades and doors with protective metal panels, rendering them nearly unrecognizable. Rita Mahfouz succeeded in getting back her money. She was armed with a plastic gun. These shots were filmed on Abd al-Malik Street in downtown Beirut, once among the city's most luxurious neighborhoods. You can notice the panels here are more upscale. Today, a ghostly atmosphere lingers with empty shuttered shops and boutiques that once brimmed with life, now frozen in time. You would think that this is the result of the recent events, meaning the economic collapse or the explosion. But in fact, these businesses have been struggling with economic difficulties decades before the economic collapse of 2019, and most have remained closed ever since. Now, to understand why the very downtown of Beirut feels deserted, it's important to mention Solidaire, Société Libanaise pour le Développement et la Reconstitution de Beyrouth, French label. A real estate company founded in 1994 by then Prime Minister Rafiq Hariri to build the area after the civil war. According to the planners, the redevelopment project is one of the world's most significant and challenging urban regeneration projects in implementation at the turn of the millennium, superlative upon superlative. Among a list of controversial procedures, Solidaire was given sweeping powers to forcibly expropriate properties, transforming downtown into a high-end, luxurious commercial hub inaccessible to average citizens, and altering the architectural authentic heritage, failing in revitalizing the city and restoring its dynamic, vibrant cosmopolitan character. Exacerbated by Solidaire's ties to political power, which have led to allegations of conflict of interest and political favoritism, today downtown Beirut's ghostly atmosphere stands as a reminder of the broader failures in urban planning, economic policy, and governance in Lebanon and worldwide. So I was filming in downtown Beirut and the streets were eerily empty. At 3 p.m., I found myself as the sole wanderer in the area, with only a few passers-by appearing now and then. Can you imagine? I was the only one on a busy afternoon in the most central areas of the capital city. Suddenly, a security guard, likely in his 50s, approached and noticed me filming. "What are you doing, love?" he asked. I explained that I was an artist working on a project and quickly reassured him that it's not for TV. In Lebanon, artists tend to raise fewer concerns than journalists, and students even less. So what's the project about, he asked. I replied, I'm capturing the buildings of downtown Beirut. I'm interested in urban architecture. His face lit up. He said, oh, I'm an architect myself. I was quite intrigued and hesitated to ask him why, as an architect, he was now working in security. But curiosity got the best of me. He let out a cynical but gentle laughter and said, in 2020, Solidaire was one of the first to pay in fresh dollars, while others were stuck using the deflated currency. So I left a job. I have a family to feed, you know. Feeling that my question was inappropriate, I decided to change the subject. So I asked him, but what exactly are you guarding? The shops are empty. And just as he was about to answer me, a fit, muscular man in sportswear jogged towards the end of the street and greeted him. Do you recognize him? The guard asked me. I shook my head. He's the guy that the woman calls, Ahmad, please come inside, please, in one of the viral explosion videos. He's famous now. He lives nearby and jogs here every day around this time. And the man trotted past us and soon disappeared, leaving the street ghostly once again. Beirut's windows and facades are no longer apertures that connect the inside to the outside, separating the private from the public. Instead, they have been transformed into blank screens, surfaces that hide as much as they reveal. This shift from glass to opaque material marks a deeper urban transformation, altering the architecture of the city in significant ways. I recently spoke with Rana Eid, a sound designer from the city, who shared an observation that startled me. After the 2019 and 2020 events, meaning the port explosion and the economic collapse, she noticed that Beirut during the day now sounds like what Beirut used to sound like during the night. I was blown away by this revelation. I had never really paid attention to the sounds of the shots I took. The camera's microphone isn't great for picking up those changes anyway. But why would the city's soundscape turn from day to night? Rana thinks it's probably due to less traffic and rising gas prices. Plus, there are fewer generators and air conditioners working because of the fuel and electricity shortages. So the ambience is now quieter. That makes sense, but even she wasn't too convinced. A few minutes into our chat, I was telling her about the visual changes I've been capturing and showed her a few screenshots of these images that I had printed on paper. She was astonished. Sweet heavens, she said. So that's why the sound has changed. It's the panels. These panels have replaced the glass and completely dampened the city's acoustics. The city's soundscape had flattened just like the visual landscape. What really surprised me here is that she's been out in the streets of Beirut recording sounds, yet hadn't noticed these panels, as if they are too subtle. In fact, many people I spoke to were genuinely surprised when they saw the panels. They really hadn't noticed them at all. It's as if they were as invisible as the glass they are replacing. So it got me thinking, could it be that because most of the panels are blue, gray, and white, they confuse them for being the sky reflected on glass? Could it be that because windows are higher than the human eye level, they just didn't spot them? Could I be hallucinating? When doing some research, I came across the Ganzfeld effect, an experiment conducted by German psychologist Wolfgang Metzger in the 1930s. He found that staring at a flat monochromatic surface for a period of time could lead to visual distortion. The subject that he studied reported seeing gray clouds that gradually transformed into darkness when looking at unmodulated and uniform fields. Even the brightest red or blue turn into dull gray. It's just that the brain is incapable of grasping how far the colorful field is because of the lack of discernible forms, so it amplifies the neutral noise. What's interesting here is that the Ganzfeld effect, besides giving the impression of going blind, might provoke hallucinations for some people, as well as an altered state of consciousness, also known as the prisoner's cinema.
هذا حل ايه؟ هي نزلت البناية يا محمد.
فاكر الشبابيك ما بعرف شو هذا يا اخي ما بعرف.
هبطت نزلوا بناي
لا يا رب لا يا رب دخل اسمك يا رب دخل اسمك
يا الله شو ها لا واحد تاني يا الله هيدا مقلع حلو عنه
يا لا إله إلا الله لا إله إلا الله محمد رسول الله ضربوا جسر الكولا يا رب
شفتوا كيف نزل؟ مخيف لا شيء مخيف يا محمد أول مرة بشوفه لايف بهاي الطريقة يا زلمة شفت؟ شو مستشفى الزهراء شو بدهم بربها يا زلمة؟ I'm good
مساء الخير جيران. هاي البنايات كلها على الأرض. الله بيعوض. هذا الملجأ كله تحت كله والع ما عاش في شي الله يعوض علينا كله على الأرض كله راح كله على الأرض.
These windows haven't just reflected the turmoil surrounding them, but have become targets themselves, absorbing the brunt of violence and destruction tailored for them. Enemies have come to understand that these windows possess a power as significant as their most devastating weapons, since they are present in every household, making them a widespread means of destruction. Since October 2023, Beirut's windows have been trembling as Israel's attacks on Lebanon have escalated, echoing the violence of the genocide unfolding in Gaza. Lebanon, one of the few steadfast allies of the Palestinian people, has been facing similar threats. Israel's recent strikes on Beirut began with breaking the sound barriers, which are extremely loud sonic booms simulating a rocket sound, causing widespread panic and shattering glass across the city. Imagine what these sounds can do to a population that dreads fireworks or slamming doors. This soon escalated to direct rocket attacks on Beirut's southern suburb, targeting key Lebanese resistance members and claiming civilian lives in its wake. In July, and in a troubling first, Israeli forces have employed exploding pagers and talkie-walkies, or walkie-talkies, as covert weapons rigged to detonate without warning, targeting the individuals holding them. Some were struck while being inside their homes, while others fell victim on the streets, spreading fear and chaos throughout the community. By September 2024, Israel intensified its assaults throughout Lebanon, focusing on the southern Beirut suburb of Dahi. Entire buildings have been reduced to rubble in a few days, with civilians' casualties mounting as homes, hospitals, and religious sites lie in ruins. This tactic, part of the so-called Dahi doctrine, is named after that same suburb, which was completely flattened during the 2006 war with Israel before it was built again. The doctrine seeks to wield disproportionate power and cause immense damage and destruction to eliminate resistance militants. Such a response, and I quote from the IDF, aims at inflicting damage and meting out punishment to an extent that will demand long and expensive reconstruction processes, end of quote. Despite possessing high-precision weaponry, the indiscriminate nature of these strikes in densely populated urban areas has yet to provoke widespread international condemnation. While some international legal organizations have condemned Israel of war crimes, their voices remain insufficient to counter Israel's ongoing military ambitions. On October 1, 2024, Israel launched a full-scale invasion of southern Lebanon, reducing entire villages to dust and destroying much of the country's infrastructure. In November, a ceasefire was signed, halting hostilities for 60 days and requiring Israeli withdrawal by January 26, 2025. However, Israel continued bombing, with 855 ceasefire violations recorded by late January. With the support of the USA, they extended the ceasefire and withdrawal to February 18, which means yesterday. But Israel has just announced its plan to keep forces in 5 strategic points in Lebanon. As I speak, nearly 1 million displaced from the south await returning to their shattered homes, many of which having windows that will soon be covered by tarpaulin, nylon, plastic, or wood. What was once a transparent plane offering views of the world beyond has now become an opaque barrier, a surface that closes off rather than opens up, that obscures light rather than lets it in, that absorbs rather than reflects, that kills rather than protects. Newly installed glass panels are only the latest replacements in a series of previous shatterings and previous replacements, with some families having to repair window panes in buildings that still bear bullet marks from the Civil War. Petrified layers of calamity have become palimpsests of crushed visions, but constantly renewed.
أنا من بلد الشبابيك المجروحة بالحب المفتوحة عالصدفة وانت من وين؟
أنا من بلد الحكايات المحكية عالمجد ومبنية عالإلفي. أنت من وين؟
أنا من بلد الشبابيك المجروحة بالحب مفتوحة عالصدفة وانت من وين؟
أنا من بلد الحكايات المحكية عالمجد مبنية عالإلفي.
مرقوا امبارح عالعالي
مرقوا فوق الليالي
كانت ايديهم
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rita. That was fantastic. I'm just going to get out of the mic.
Okay.
It's so layered, your presentation, your lecture, your performance. It's so layered in terms of the media that you're using, the sound art, the videos that are almost painterly the references to the monochrome, but at the same time, it's also extremely political. It's historically conscious. And I thought it's an amazing example of how you can be both poetic and political, and you don't need to kind of one doesn't need to kind of annul the other. I think your lecture is kind of a very good example of that. I'm wondering whether there are any questions from the audience or indeed online. I think we have some people online. So I'm happy to, Paul.
I've got some questions, but I'll also be taking the mic around as well for other questions.
We can alternate.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Rita. It's a great, really beautiful and poignant and quite sad as well, but also very beautiful presentation. I guess I have a couple of questions. One is political, not political, but political economic, and one is aesthetic. Can you say a bit more about the political economy of these coverings, the boards? What I mean by that is, who owns them? Are they put there by the owners of each building? Is there a city kind of planning an element to this? Is it coordinated in any ways, or is it pretty random? And I say that because for the other side, that's the first question, the political economy behind it. What is there money interest behind it? And that relates as well to the aesthetic question, because obviously Beirut, from what I understand it, is, and you can see from the images, has a quite a long history of modernism, architecturally and urban. It's known as the Paris of the the East, etc., Middle East, and these boards, these coverings, seem to kind of go along with that, or somehow reflect that modernist heritage, which kind of gives a sense of it being deliberate, although perhaps what you're saying is that it isn't deliberate. But do you know what I mean? It fits in very, some of them it looks so aesthetic, it looks so clean and so ordered. Yeah. Whereas most cities that I see coverings after, windows being shattered are just like brown cardboard and most places you would have realms and realms of graffiti all over stuff. I mean, there were some graffitis, but it's incredible how clean they were. So there's a kind of a political economic element that I'd like you to just give us a bit more information about, and then also the aesthetics of that, which I think you kind of comment on visually, but in a way, how does that relate to the history of the city, and if there's a kind of deliberate component to that?
Yeah. Well, to start with, in the repairs after the explosion, there was no planning, no coordination. So it was really open to NGOs, to charities, and there used to be like long lists of people, sometimes individuals or small groups, taking in charge this building or that neighborhood, or it was very chaotic. And so, no, there was no planning behind, of course, not these surface and these panels. They were just, mostly were improvised because people really had to cover their windows as soon as, very quickly after the explosion. And so it was left for, I know a lot of people who were like trying to find someone to help them, not just with the windows. Now, I've been focusing here on the panels, but also any other kind of repair, the ceilings, the walls, etc. So it was very chaotic, extremely chaotic. And even in the downtown of Beirut, which is supposed to be like the central place of the capital city, this area was left deserted, unrepaired. I mean, it took them much more than the other areas to repair what's in downtown Beirut, because this area is not very much inhabited. Some people call it a cardboard city. You feel like it's a fake city. Even before the explosion, you go there, you feel like this is a fake place. Some people called it Disneyland. And so it was repaired the last. I was hearing an interview with a Lebanese architect, and she was saying that actually some NGOs, while repairing these buildings, some of them are heritage buildings, they completely disfigured the architecture by putting aluminum windows instead of, wooden. They just couldn't keep the heritage aspect of these buildings. So yeah, not planned, improvised. Now, when we talk about the panels in the downtown Beirut that have been there for decades now, these are the more sophisticated ones. These are usually taken in charge from Solidaire itself, because that, again, that central area of Beirut is governed kind of by Solidaire. So it's a private company. Imagine like really the central part of a capital city being privatized. And so they would provide these panels and pay for them, which is different from what happened after the explosion. Yeah, that's basically it.
Thank you.
I really like your work, but I have a very personal question I want to ask you. So, have you put your presentation as a monologue with your works together? So otherwise, it's like if without the presentation, just with windows, the video of the windows and the sounds from the surrounding. It could give the audience a lot of imagination to say what has happened in that time and that location. Just wondering, because after with your presentation, I can understand the whole things very clearly.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so it's a part of your work or it's just a presentation? Am I clear?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Like I have conceived this work as having both the text and the visuals. Good. I don't know if putting the visuals alone would have explained, or it's not a matter of explaining actually, but it's also a way of writing, because in this text, it's not just information that are given there, but it's there's kind of a storytelling somehow, sometimes. It has narrative elements too. As I said at the very beginning, I initially conceived this artwork for being a film. I have a background in filmmaking, and that's what I'm used to do. Editing shots and maybe writing a voiceover without me being here. But for some reason, I felt, I don't know, the need to have these panels and me kind of witnessing, or I don't know, relating this immediacy that I felt, because, their presence is really striking in the city. It's not like 5, 6 panels, it's all over the place. So yeah, that's why I chose this format.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
I think I'll ask a question if everyone's still thinking about their own questions. I was very struck by your use of sounds. I think you mentioned that as a form of narrative, but I'm wondering how that device, the kind of the soundscape, which is basically you're using a soundscape. The images aren't necessarily related. Sometimes they relate to the sound, but not always. It is the narrative is based on the sound. Whilst there's a kind of, I mentioned different layers. That is one way of layering. But at that somewhat moment, you mentioned that you're talking to a friend who's a sound artist. Now, I'm wondering how much that encounter informed your strategy to kind of adopt this narrative form through the soundscape. rather than the visual, which is usually the predominant means in filmmaking, I'm guessing. Yeah.
No, it did not. This is not what prompted the format decision.
I guess my question is, what prompted the decision?
Yeah, well, what prompted? And by sounds, you mean my text or the sounds that I use in the media, like the media that I collected?
I'm referring mainly to the media sound rather than the image, which you're kind of separating, and then you're overimposing your own footage, which they're almost stills. They're kind of still shots of buildings, and the only thing that's moving is the kind of people or cars passing, but they're kind of still, very still. So I'm kind of intrigued by the layering that you're using in terms of the narrative device.
I felt that the images were too still. I mean, they're just panels, almost blank sometimes. Now, this stillness says a lot, but at the same time, I liked exploring the contrast that happens between visuals and the visuals and the sound, because the sound is very dramatic. It's like a lot is happening, pains and traumas, and while the images are flat, frontal, blank, still. So I think that this contrast is what prompted to like this type of, I would say, editing, but also I wanted to portray what was happening behind these windows, because one of my biggest questions here is like, these are supposed to be windows. You're supposed to see what's behind them, and vice versa. And so I wanted to recreate somehow, just by the sound, the missing visuals of what's happening there, like the bank robber, people filming at the explosion, people vandalizing the shops, etc. So yeah, it's the contrast mainly that prompted that, and the issue of night and day, which the sound designer was telling me about. I think it helped me kind of think differently of the sound design and of the sound mixing of that piece, by removing all the sounds that came from my camera and recreating them in a way that would be closer to what nights sound like, this quieter ambiences.
I was just picking up on what you were saying about the way that the coverings keep out, or they're opaque. This question of opacity, so I think and you mentioned it in the film. I was just thinking about how, in some respects, is that a response to conflict, to war, to destruction? Because the architecture of global capital is actually the reverse. It's transparency, it's glass, right? If you look at cities around the world, in downtowns, you just see pure glass. You go to the city of London, you just see it's all predicated this idea of transparency, which is completely false, of course, because behind it they're making loads of money that we don't know about, right? Hiding money everywhere. But there's this kind of sense in which global, the kind of global architecture of contemporary hypercapitalism is about transparency. This seems to be a big contrast to that.
Yeah.
There's a kind of opacity, a kind of hunkering down. I wonder whether that was a kind of response to, I mean, you're saying that, because what you've said is that the context of this is all kinds of, is awful. I mean, it's Israeli bombardment, it's decades of corruption, internal corruption. It's a lot of interests trying to hide things. So I just wonder where, there's an aesthetic element of opacity. And there's also a kind of political, economic element of opacity. I wondered how you reflect on that.
Yeah, exactly. I wouldn't say it's like the architectural the architecture of capitalism. I wouldn't say it's transparency. I would say it's invisibility. It's like the invisibility of power, of ideology. And here it's like right in your face. Like there's nothing invisible, and there's nothing to hide anymore. And it's a bit what happened. I mean, I don't know. It's the feeling of many of the Lebanese people that recently in the last few years, things that have been lurking in the depths have suddenly exploded, like suddenly surfaced. And this is like that's a term I'm also working on, like the term to surface and to use surfaces also. When things when things were hidden, invisible, and then they're suddenly there. We also have the feeling that this is what happened in the country, like that that ammonium that was hidden for many years in the port, this corruption that has been there from the end of the civil war. Lots of people that say that the civil war, they say, ended in 1990 because they don't really believe that it's ended, because it's latent, it's still there. And so, yeah, recently it just exploded. And so that on several layers, economically, financially, politically, etc., like everything has come to, yeah, I mean, things have surfaced, and we just seeing what the myths, was hiding before, but now things are here in front of everyone.
I usually have millions of questions, but I just want to say thank you for this talk and the fact that you're witnessing. I haven't got a question, actually. The whole film, your presentation was so solid and strong that, I kind of feel, we're just kind of witnessing the trauma, but also just us witnessing this, but also witnessing what's happening in Palestine is, I mean, I don't know even what to say. It's really hard to kind of be a witness to that. But for you to witness that, and for us to witness that while we're witnessing stuff happening right now in Palestine. So thank you for your presentation.
Thank you.
Thank you for the way you're narrating it. Thank you for this poetic but yet very real situation. And it's really important that we kind of are able to talk about it and see this. And I thank everybody here and Michael for actually having you here.
Thank you.
Thank you. That's it. That's all I want to say.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Maria. Thanks. Do we have any other questions? No? Okay, in that case, Jess is shy. Okay.
But yeah, thank you. Yeah, it also reminds me of my experience during the Hong Kong protests when, there is this level of witnessing where the graffiti are being erased, and then, the wall become like a completely white painted wall, and as if it mean nothing, but you can see the traces. So a lot of your film, as if it's wandering or ghostly wandering on the surface of, like, looking into the disappearance of public life, because there is no like inside, but there's outbursts of graffiti, and there is discussions about, people have protested it, and there is the sound recording of telling him not to go inside. So, but then the whole film is, completely shot in the public space, and is using the public recording sourced video as well. So I think that's a very interesting observation that Paul just mentioned about this level of inside and outside and opacity. And I guess I do have a question of thinking, like, would you also like to continue the work of looking on the inside?
I would say that the inside has has, I mean, broke the barrier and showed itself to us. Yeah. No, I've been, I mean, I'm very much interested by the surfaces because I think that they reveal a lot. I mean, of course, one can have the other approach to look inside. But for some reason, I prefer looking at the surfaces. And I feel that they show, if not as what the inside does, but maybe more, I don't know. And especially in this case, in this situation here, where things, as I said earlier, like have just surfaced, you know. It's like there's no difference between inside and outside. So yeah.
Yeah, I think that's amazing. Yeah, thank you.
It's also about trauma, isn't it? It's like the trauma kind of really comes across, even though the surfaces are flat.
Yeah.
It's almost still and silent. It says so much. And I think that's part of the way we can actually think about trauma. Sometimes trauma is so silent.
Yeah.
It's like you can't see anything. It's just a blank page. But like you say, a lot of things have come to the surface. The gloves are off now from everyone. You know, it's like we see everything that's been kind of hidden and under this banner of democracy and, you know, kind of
yeah,
all of that is off. And so there's a lot in those blank white surfaces. And I think your film is so multi-layered and is so relevant to our time that is kind of, I think at the moment we're also kind of also traumatized, and it's enough to look at the flat surfaces and what we see, destruction. It just says a lot, really. And I think if you take time before we can actually narrate this situation, because we're in it.
Yeah.
We're in it.
Yeah.
It's happening right now, and it's kind of.
And it's very fast.
And it's very fast. So to be able to actually kind of start thinking about the aesthetics of it might take some time for us to reflect on it, and then kind of make. I know as an artist, I've not been able to make anything for the past year and a half. Literally nothing. The canvas is totally blank. And that's really not like, you know, for artists, you know, sometimes they say, oh, we have to see if we respond to it. It's so traumatic emotionally that I think blankness is just a lot. So I think the surface has really made a lot of sense in a way, but then the film is incredibly layered. The sound is amazing. Thank you. Sorry, I just tend to go on and discuss.
Thank you. Yeah, I think if we don't have any more questions, I would just like to. Oh, there's one question. They're still typing. But I would just like to thank you for an incredible demonstration of the kind of the power of practice-based research. I think you've shown through your presentation how you can be equally or differently analytically and politically engaged through practice. I think it's a credible example of the power of a practice-based research. I think we might have something coming from online, but let me just
We've had lots of really lovely responses as well.
do you want to?
Yeah, we've had some really lovely responses to your presentation this evening, and so many people really appreciating how personal it is to you as well. So thank you so much for that. I'm just waiting. We might have one actual question coming through. Yeah.
Seems to be a long question.
But I'm sure if you know, again, there's a lot to kind of contemplate and think about. So I'm sure, you know, we might have some follow-up questions for you at some point.
Yeah, sure.
I have this problem by the time I'm thinking around like
Yeah.
that's that way of actually responding or kind of working. It's okay. I'm just just saying how hard it is.
I think I'll have to close it because it's just taking a bit too long. But thank you very much for everyone for coming, and it's a really kind of a privilege to be doing one of these hybrid events rather than purely online, and to see so many of you kind of old colleagues and new ones in person. So thanks very much. Thank you, Rita, and keep an eye out for our next open lecture that we'll be announcing shortly soon. Thank you very much.
Okay.